Welcome to our Wednesday webinar, guys. If you are new here, welcome. We're glad you found us. If you're returning, you might remember me from a few months ago. I am back from maternity leave. I had my baby, next generation of route consultant logistics family. I'm thrilled to be back. I love doing these webinars with you guys. So we're going to have some fun today. We have Danny Robinson, who's going to be joining us a little bit later to tell us some new happenings with seller financing, what perks of seller financing, why we're seeing more of it in this market. Lots of good stuff about that coming later. But before I get too much into all of that, I have to read our pretty little disclaimer here. Route consultant is not endorsed by, is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. All that means is that you will not hear any materially non-public information here today, but we hope you do learn something from us. Like I said, Danny's going to teach us a little bit later, but I want to go ahead at the beginning here and tell you about one event that we have coming up here. For anyone present who is Linehaul specific, this is for you. We have our first ever Linehaul 101 Summit coming up this month. It is on April 21st. It's going to be here in Nashville. You'll get to see our office space here in Brentwood. If you haven't been to Nashville, it's pretty awesome place to visit. Lots going on here in the city of Nashville. This is only one day, so you can come in, attend our event, and then go party down on Broadway if you really desire that. But this will be the only one we do this year. So if you are interested in Linehaul, and you want more information on this Linehaul 101 Summit, we will pop that in the chat for you guys, and you can just follow the link to sign up there. Okay, so like I said, I'm bringing on Danny here in a few minutes. Danny is one of our regional sales directors here. He has probably worked with a few of you before. If you've tried to sell your business or you needed some help with your business, he is really an expert. He's had many years of experience helping buyers and sellers on both sides. So we're excited to have him here to talk about seller financing, why you should do seller financing, and how that can help you close your deal potentially. But before I bring him on, I wanted to go through our inventory this week here over in the brokerage. We had 3 new listings that went live. In the southeast Wisconsin, we have one 11 P&D route operation listed at $850,000. That's around 56% of revenue. This business is currently operating around a 14% EBITDA margin. It's going to come with 2 managers and 2 spare trucks. This operation over in southeast Wisconsin also could be a remote ownership opportunity for someone who's looking for that. Maybe you aren't in Wisconsin, but this sparks your interest. This fleet consists of 2015 or newer model trucks. And it also includes 2 spare vehicles as well. This CSA in Wisconsin is in a growing area, so that's always great. And then these routes are very dense, and that's going to allow for lower fuel costs and repair and maintenance, lower expenses all around. So looks like a really good opportunity there in southeast Wisconsin. And then we have 2 more that went live, one in eastern Michigan. This one is a 7 P&D route operation listed at $300,000. That's right around 41% of revenue. This one's currently operating around a 15% EBITDA margin. It's a low entry point into FedEx, into the FedEx Ground network. If you have pretty strict financing, you're looking for an easy way to get your foot in the door, this could be it for you. This current owner has over 20 years of experience as a FedEx Ground contractor. So you could learn from someone who has been in it for a very long time and hopefully get some good pointers there. This is a really dense operation consisting of predominantly residential territory near the terminal. That's also going to help with rising gas costs, any of that. Any way we can save you money is going to be a good day. Those are good things. These routes are historically really easy on drivers, especially if it's a smaller CSA. It makes it easier to hire and train drivers. If you have problems keeping drivers, this could be a good operation for you. The only thing to note about this Eastern Michigan business here is that the trucks are not included in the sale. Like I said, it's a 7 P&D route operation listed for $300,000, but there are no trucks included here. So we would want you to check out Hello Truck Lease, our program here, and see if we could get any trucks that fit this operation for you. The last one is out of Northern Washington here at 9. This is 9 P&D routes, and that is listed at $725,000. This is putting it right around 62% of revenue. This operation is currently working around a 14% EBITDA margin, 14.5%. It's going to come with 1 manager and 2 spare trucks. This operation also comes from a really tenured contractor with over 13 years of experience in the FedEx space. This is going to be a suburban territory averaging over 130 daily miles per route. This business operates under a 6-day work week, which is really great. We've been seeing more of those recently. So they probably cut off the Sunday deliveries there. They have 2 spare trucks available for overflow and your maintenance needs. You always have trucks rotating in and out of the shop, so always great to have spares there. And maybe most importantly here, this one is SBA eligible. So if you've been waiting, Northern Washington, SBA eligible business, we have it for you. Reach out to our team and get more information. All right, so that wraps up our inventory this week. So one other quick note before we bring Danny on, I just want to tell you guys who are new here, we have the chat button and we have the Q&A button. And if you put your question in the chat, I will not see it. I can only manage so many screens and so many windows. So I have your Q&A window up, so pop your questions over there and we will get to those. But like I said, if you put it in the chat, we will probably miss it. So feel free to keep loading those in as we go along here, but I'll stop talking and bring on our expert today, Mr. Danny Robinson. Danny, come on and teach us a little bit about financing, about seller financing, and why it's so important, maybe right now for our economy, how we can utilize this. We'd love to know more. Danny.
Hey, everyone. Super excited to be here. Appreciate the kind words there, Bridget. Always love to hear expert attached to my name. That's good stuff. Really good stuff. Like Bridget was telling you, I'm one of the sales directors here in the office. Closed a fair number of these deals over the past several years, and I'm excited to talk to you about something that I'm very passionate about, something that helps make us uniquely successful here at Route Consulting and closing these deals at a really high level every year, and that's seller financing. So just so we're all on the same page and speaking the same language, really quick, we want to make sure everyone knows how we're defining seller financing here in-house. And we basically put that as a loan that's being provided by the selling party to the purchasing party in lieu of traditional bank financing or in addition to traditional bank financing. So what that essentially means is the seller is going to carry a piece of the note that's going to be required to buy this business. And it's going to work very much the same way as a bank loan would. There's going to be interest involved. Sometimes there's going to be collateral involved. And we'll kind of go over all those details as we get through, my brief discussion about this. So first and foremost, I think it's important to talk about why this is such a good benefit from a buyer's perspective. We'll talk about some of the seller perspective ideology as well. But really one of the biggest and most important aspects of what seller financing is going to bring to a buyer in these deal structures is the length of time that it's going to take. There are two things that we talk about here in office that really take up a huge amount of time when you're going through structuring and closing these deals, and that's bank financing and FedEx itself. We can't do anything to fix the FedEx part of this equation. FedEx is going to do what FedEx is going to do, but we can really control some of the timeline that's soaked up by financing, by introducing seller financing into these deal structures. So really condensing the time that it takes to get lending in place for these deals is a huge part of why we really believe in and introduce seller financing to our deals. On top of that, I don't think that any of us are ignorant or unaware of what the financing and what the lending market is currently going through. There is a huge uptick in interest rates seemingly every month. The Fed is continuing to raise those rates across the board. And as of right now, the prime rate through Bank of America, which really dictates a lot of the interest rates across the lending spectrum, is stuck at a hard 8%. So with the SBA being a larger and larger part of the lending partnership that we take on in the FedEx ground world, it's important to know that the SBA, both variable and fixed rates, are going to take that prime rate of 8% and add anywhere from 2 to 3% on top of that to get you your realized interest rate for the loan that you're taking on. Average across the country right now, most SBA borrowers are seeing interest rates of 9 3/4, upwards of 10 1/4%. That is a huge chunk of debt service to be introducing to businesses that are averaging at about a 16 to 17% margins, some as high as 24, but some as low as 10. So that debt service can really eat a huge piece of your profitability if you're going to really take on that SBA loan, especially for an extended period of time. So on top of that, I also like to make sure that people know that with the SBA or even conventional lending, that there's going to be origination fees, guarantee fees, underwriting fees that are going to be attached to those loans that seller financing isn't going to carry along with it. So seller financing helps avoid all of those burdens that the traditional lending market is currently putting in place. And it really does help speed things up, like I said. On top of that, with the seller financing, the seller is acting as the bank. So you have a direct line of negotiation through your broker here at Route Consultant to go over and actually negotiate interest rates. I mean, right now we're introducing seller financing at an average of 6 to 7% versus the 10.5% top line that you're seeing from the SBA. And that's a huge difference to your bottom line. So having that direct line of negotiation and direct access to your lender and seller financing is invaluable to you in the way that you're going to negotiate this deal and structure that moving forward. So stepping away from some of the buyer perspective, let's talk about how this can benefit the seller of the business as well. If you're thinking about selling your contracts, using Route Consultant to help broker that, there's a huge benefit again to you individually, not just the buying party, by going down this route. So again, simplifying and really condensing the timeline of what it's going to take. You don't want to sit around and wait months and months and months while the bank pours over your historical financials. It really does help speed things up to introduce the seller financing. On top of that, you stand to make significantly more money if you finance your own deal, because you're going to be the one taking on those interest payments. You know, for example, if we have a $500,000 deal, just to make the numbers digestible and round, amortize that out over 5 years at a 7% interest rate, you're going to take on almost $95,000 on top of that $500,000 sale price and interest payments. And that's nothing to sneeze at. That's a good chunk of change on top of that. Sure, you're going to incur a little bit of risk, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, but taking on those additional dollars is never going to hurt anything. And on top of that, going down the route of traditional bank financing, right now, banks are being really, really difficult to get cash flows, approved through their underwriting process. We're seeing a lot of businesses who have agreed deals between buyer and seller at the listing price, and everyone's happy about that. Everyone thinks it's fair and everyone's happy to pay those prices. But even with down payments and some seller financing introduced to that deal, banks are still saying this is too high of a purchase price. With the debt service and the operating capital that we want to, provide for you, we don't think that this is the right price, and they're chopping down the sale price of those businesses. You can really avoid losing that sale price that you're trying to achieve and that you've listed your business at if you finance this deal yourself. And I understand not every contractor is going to be in a position where they can finance 100% of a deal. And we really don't introduce much of that structure as it is. A lot of the times we're introducing seller financing, between 20 and 60% of the total purchase price of the deal, not exactly 100%. But in any measure, introducing seller financing is going to really help improve the cash flow of the business, increase the bankability and the financeability through any lender, be it conventional or SBA. And it's going to, like I said, increase the timeline, or reduce the timeline rather, that it's going to take to get all of that done. Beyond just that, increasing the speed at which we can get this deal done, we're also going to be able to take advantage of some really tax beneficial aspects of seller financing. Instead of taking on 100% of the capital that you intend to sell your business for at once, paying a rather steep capital gains tax on that, if you're financing that deal out, you can really mitigate that tax burden over the length of that seller financing period. Now, I'm not a CPA. I'm certainly not a tax expert. You'll want to talk to your lawyer, talk to your CPA about this, make sure that you're keeping everything above board. There's nuances to every single state's tax brackets and what you can and can't do in these scenarios. But for the most part, it's going to be very advantageous to you. You're going to be in a lower tax bracket and be able to diminish and offset some of those tax dollars throughout the life of your seller financing amortization period. So now that we've talked about some of the benefits, really wanted to just take a brief moment and talk about what Route Consultant specifically is doing in the world of seller financing to help push our deals forward and down the closing timeline. As of right now, this calendar year, about 65, almost 70% of the deals that we have brokered or have under contract to close this calendar year have some sort of seller financing attached to them. And just for a little bit of caveat there, 100% of the deals that I'm working on right now have it introduced in some way, shape, or form. And for all the reasons that I just talked about. But what we see as we track and go through and keep note of all of the different banking and funding strategies that different deals have engaged in over the course of this year, we're seeing the SBA take a larger and larger portion of that. And several SBA lenders are requiring seller financing at a minimum of 10% at least to get an SBA deal approved. They want to see 10% from the buyer down as an initial deposit, and a minimum of 10% from the seller and seller carry. Sometimes there's going to be a bit of a standby on that payback period. We can talk about that in the Q&A section if you guys are more curious about what that terminology means. But a dark little secret about the lending world, if there's not enough cash at closing to make the deal cash flow for the bank as far as debt service is concerned, they are not going to go to the buying party to ask for more money. They want them to keep that operating capital in reserves in case something comes up. They're going to absolutely go to the selling party first and ask them to carry a larger portion of that deal to help make it work. And if it doesn't work out, then the bank's just going to walk, because they can be pretty choosy right now with what they're doing. I can't stress to you enough how beneficial for the sellers, especially this tactic can be. With all that being said, I feel like I would be remiss without letting you know at least a little bit of some of the cons of seller financing. There aren't really any for the buying party. The buyers are really going to be winning if they get this introduced into their deal. But sellers, you can take on a little bit of risk with this. Obviously, the big looming question that most people have when it comes to seller financing is, what happens if the buyer defaults on this deal that we've made? What in the world do I do? How do I recoup my money? And the good news is that Route Consultant has a plan for that. You can work with your broker to liaise this conversation, but we absolutely can help secure the risk that you're taking and the money that you're lending out for this deal in the form of promissory notes and personal guarantees. We can absolutely introduce that into the asset purchase agreement that we're structuring to govern these deals. We have a really fantastic administrative team that is very familiar with all of these documents, and we can template those out for you, put them into black and white, introduce them to the deal so that you can go to your legal counsel and get their thumbs up and their seal of approval on that. And it really makes everything that much quicker and easier. You can, of course, collateralize what you need to collateralize to secure yourself as well. Traditionally, what we're going to recommend is you go and try to collateralize and put a lien against the fleet that you're selling with your business. That's the most rapid and simple route to have some sort of hard, physical asset to keep in your back pocket should the worst happen in this contractor default or fail perhaps when they take over the business. But regardless of what you have collateralized, that personal guarantee and promissory note is not all that different from the same guarantees and signatures that you put on a traditional or SBA bank loan. It is legally binding, and it will absolutely tie down the buyer to paying back those dollars. You're going to have to go through the rigmarole of the legal world to get your money back, but you are going to be secured in that. Talk to your lawyers about it if you have more questions. I'm happy to answer questions here as well, but really lean on your broker to help negotiate those terms and be that middle ground to go back and forth between buyer and seller, get a firm personal financial statement that's current from the buyer, and you can really take a look at their physical assets. And there's no problem with telling them that you want to collateralize those things. I've personally had investment properties and rental properties that buyers own collateralized. I'm working several deals right now where that's the case. It's completely appropriate and encouraged in some regards. So don't hesitate to really approach Route Consultant in any way to ask more questions about this. If you want to get your deal closed this year, if you want to get the best price for your sale, and you want to get the lowest interest rate coming in and buying these businesses, there is no better way to do it than through seller financing. So with that being said, I'll stop spewing stuff at you guys. I'm sure you have some questions. I'll let Bridget come on. I'm sure she's got a couple on deck for us, but we're going to go ahead and enter into the Q&A portion of this. I appreciate you listening to my spiel.
Thank you, Danny. That was awesome. As a former consultant here at Route Consultant, when I used to have my hands in a lot of different deals, it was always such a win to have seller financing as a part of it, because you're right, it makes it go faster. There's motivation for the seller to really be invested in the success of the transfer of the business. And especially with financing these days and interest rates, it's getting harder and harder. So our sellers out there who do seller financing, they're the ones who are moving quickly and are having really successful and easy transactions. So
not only are they moving quickly, Bridget, but they're selling their business for the closest to, if not right at asking price, because banks aren't ripping the P&Ls to shreds and putting their own big foot in the middle of the deal. Exactly.
All right, Danny, well, let's see what the people have to say over in the Q&A. I know we have lots of questions rolling in, all about different parts of, the process of becoming a FedEx contractor here, but hopefully we get some that are specific to seller financing, maybe for Danny to show off his wisdom. But I will start with this more difficult one, Danny.
Oh,
put
no.
you on the spot here. But we have a question here from Kevin. Kevin wants to know if we have any advice for him. He says that his terminal is moving an hour away from the current location in July.
Mhm.
How would you recommend navigating staffing, retention, and recruitment there? That's a bit of a doozy, Kevin. I'm so sorry that's happening to you. But Danny, do you have any tips just off the top of your head, things he can start doing?
Absolutely. I mean, you're not the only one that's being re-domiciled. There's several, through FedEx Ground's efforts to really tighten their belt and take some of that top line expenditure off. There's a lot of different terminals that are being re-domiciled and combined. And I think that there's probably going to be more and more of that with the express integration into the Ground network. What I can tell you is that now is the time to act. Waiting until you transition in July is a big mistake. We can get you connected right away with Bright Flag Recruiting. They're our national network of recruiters, and they are the best in the business at what they do. We can help you get drivers that are localized. We can help you find paths forward to incentivize your current employees to stay on. There are ways you can succeed in this. And at the end of the day, it's probably going to end up being a win for you, because they don't re-domicile businesses for no reason. It's going to make things a little bit difficult in the interim and to get things up and running. But Kevin, fear not. We have ways that we can help you with that. Reach out to the hotline, or we can get you that Bright Flag information maybe in the chat. I'm not sure how that works, Bridget. That's not my area. But getting to work with Tony Tovey at Bright Flag Recruiting is the number one thing you should be doing right now. We can get you an entire new staff if that's what you need. We can have a recurring effort to keep you recruited. We can manage your Indeed.com recruiting page. All sorts of things that we can do, starting with a recruiting analysis and an analysis of that area that you're going to be moving and re-domiciling to. We can get you a full scale report of what that recruiting world is going to look like for you. So don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to help you with that.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. The only other thing I would add to that, Kevin, is really focus on the BC and the BC transition there. Sometimes it's a lot easier to hire drivers, but BCs are incredibly valuable to your business. So if you have a BC currently that you absolutely adore and who's done a fabulous job, offering, retention bonuses or maybe a transition plan, at least having something in place for the transition, to have that BC, maybe train an additional BC for some contingency there, but really focus on your management when it comes to the BC part of it. Don't just gloss over that and assume you'll be good with the one BC. I would definitely go ahead and stack your training there. All right, next one. This is anonymous. We want to know, how fast can you purchase other routes? Is there usually a waiting period? Danny, $1 million question. If I have money to blow, how long will it take?
It's going to go a lot faster if there's seller financing in the deal, that's for sure. But I can tell you that, typical timeline from getting an offer accepted to getting approved by FedEx and taking over that business, anywhere from 4 to 8 months, somewhere in the middle is ideal. But, being optimistic, if you're a cash buyer with seller financing to bring up the rest of the rear, we've seen them done in as little as 30 days. I mean, that's super optimistic, but bet on 4 or 5 months at minimum. I think that's really an appropriate time frame right now. FedEx is going through a season of change, just like everyone is at the moment. So getting approvals through the terminal is taking a little bit longer than it historically did, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible by any means. I mean, there's no technically like a waiting period that FedEx is going to implement on you. If you're a current contractor, they may have scale limitations if you're trying to acquire inside of the same terminal. But really, there's no reason to think that there should be a waiting period. As long as you can go in, knock out that assignee interview meeting, that aim with the terminal manager, and prove that you're the right guy for it. If the deal's structured right, we can get it closed up pretty quick for you. And we can talk to you more and more about the consulting services that we offer here and how we can prep you for that aim, how we can get you through our acquisition strategy program, and really make sure that you're putting that money to good work and ensuring the time that you're investing into that deal by all but guaranteeing you can get through that aim with flying colors. Okay.
Absolutely. We have a pretty good track record there. Maybe I shouldn't gloat, but getting through those AIM meetings. All right. I think I'm going like every other one is going to be a little bit of a doozy for you, Danny. You're handling it well, though. This next one is from Will. Will wants to know this $4 billion expense cut proposed for 2024. You think this is good or bad for the ground contractors? How are we feeling? You touched on it a little bit already, but
yeah, I mean, it's good to know that your only customer as a FedEx ground contractor, which is FedEx, is not just throwing away money frivolously. They've introduced for the second year in a row a very large increase as far as cost is concerned to consumers. They're charging more to deliver their packages, and we have it on very good authority, and we've seen it in black and white in the MISOs that are being offered now, that they are offering improved rates to contractors this year. Having them not waste money on unnecessary management and terminals that aren't really in a spot that are doing much for you. Having FedEx kind of pull back on some of the VITA requirements they were putting into the P&D space. FedEx is showing us that they are really recognizing some of the struggles that contractors have faced over the last couple of years, and they're doing what they can to help combat that. So I think it's a very good thing overall for FedEx Ground. We're seeing that the express integration starting to take place at a really high level, which is also going to benefit the contractors. That's a part of that cost-cutting measure. And on top of that, there's just a ton of things that we've seen as far as e-commerce and those patterns and the purchasing patterns of Americans right now that we're very bullish on FedEx Ground. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic right now. So I hope that's $1 billion answer to your $4 billion question, bud.
That was great, Danny. Very good. All right, next one we have here. This is from another anonymous attendee, and I will go ahead and say, I forgot to say this at the beginning. Sometimes for these webinars, we do a question of the day. However, I was not feeling so creative today, so you all are off the hook. Don't tell Anna Lee. She loves the question of the day and learning all of those fun facts about you guys, but you do not fret. You do not have to answer one of our silly questions. Just go ahead and pop your question in the Q&A, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can. So here is your next one. How can you be successful and grow a business remotely? Are there any tips, Danny? Have you seen this be done successfully?
Yes, I've seen it be done successfully, and I've also seen it fail miserably. You can be a remote operator in this space. It's not impossible. You just have to really understand FedEx ground, and you have to have a BC that knows what he's doing, and you have to have a great relationship with that BC, him or her. I shouldn't just say, there's some great female BCs out there. Remote ownership is going to present some unique difficulties and struggles for you as an AO. Namely, you're not going to be in there really reading the vibes that your team has. You're not going to be in there building that. You can't see with your own eyes some of the problems that may or may not be present there. That's why that communication with your BC is so important. That's why really monitoring your fuel card usage to make sure there's no iffy behavior happening there. Managing that remotely is absolutely a possibility, but you just got to really be dialed into your financials. You got to spend the time, not just think that remote ownership is absentee ownership. You're still going to have to put the work in remotely. But there's absolutely ways that can be a success. I have a business that I'm brokering out of Albany, Georgia right now. The contractor that's selling it has owned it for 3 years, and he's been to the terminal twice. The BC is phenomenal. The driver pool there, the recruitment is easy. It's a very deep pool of drivers, and it's a terminal that has pretty consistent volume. So in the right scenario, it can absolutely be successful, but you have to do the legwork on the front end. You have to get your business set up the right way. You can partner with us to help make sure that your route optimization, your DRO is on point. And we can make sure that we introduce you to our BC training program and our recruiting services. You want top-notch drivers. You want a great BC, and you want to really, 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 really dialed in DRO to make sure that any of that waste is mitigated, because the bottom line is going to be hit by your BC costs. It costs more to have a good BC. Sometimes you'll need two to make it work as a remote owner. Those dollars that you invest have to be mitigated somewhere along the way, and making sure your routes are optimized, your fleet is in tip-top shape. That's a good way to start.
Great. All right, next we have here another anonymous one for you, Danny. Can someone do well in this space without trucking or shipping experience?
Yeah, it happens every day. The majority of the new investors that we introduce to FedEx ground, and we do more of that than anyone else in the country, they have no trucking experience. It's rare that we actually come across someone who has logistics experience.
That's really how we got started, right? With Spencer's story. No, I think the majority of the people who end up working with Route Consultant don't have a ton of that logistics background. So it's very possible to be successful here.
Yeah, absolutely. Work with us. Don't just think that we're trying to sell you a bill of goods. We have the world's foremost consultants in this space working right here in our offices in Nashville. And every single day they're taking novices and turning them into experts. Work with us and we'll work with you, and we'll make sure that you're prepared to go through this. You can absolutely be successful. And I think that it's just a home run to work with us in the consultancy, because we're going to make sure that you're not only prepped for the acquisition, but we have programs and ways to help you operationally, evaluating businesses, going through negotiations, all of that. Put us to work for you and we'll help make you money.
Very good. Next one we have here is from Will. Will wants to know, Danny, can you explain the concept of assumable truck debt and how that can play into the price of negotiation when buying a route? So we haven't talked about assumable truck debt in a minute. So you want to give us a little briefing on that, Danny?
Yeah, absolutely. Next to seller financing, it's my favorite thing to introduce to deals. It makes things so simple. Interest rates on truck loans are so much lower than they are with any other loan that you're going to assume. So assuming truck debt, we'll just give you some even numbers to play with here. Let's say that the business that you're buying is listed for $1 million and the seller has $250,000 in truck debt attached to their fleet. In an assumable truck debt scenario, what's going to happen is you're still purchasing that business for $1 million, but instead of paying that cash at the closing table, what you're going to do is you're going to pay $750,000 at the closing table, and that $250,000 in truck debt is going to be taken on into your name. So you're still paying $1 million over the longevity of the deal, rather than having the selling party pay off those trucks and pass the titles on to you at closing. You're simply going to take on those monthly payments. You're going to take on those registrations. You're going to have everything transition to your Schedule B, just like you would if the titles were coming free and clear. It just makes things a little bit more simple. It helps deals cash flow a lot easier through the banks, the same way seller financing does. It's a phenomenal aspect of deal structure. And if the debt that a business seller is carrying is assumable, all the better. I would very strongly encourage that. I hope that was a good enough answer for you there, Ken.
That's great. Okay, this next one actually is related to seller financing. So this is from Salim. I'm sure I did not pronounce that right, but they want to know if the period of seller financing is rather short, like a 1 to 2 year. Is it reasonable to ask for a very low interest rate, possibly even 0%?
So 0% is probably not going to happen. There's just no juice on that squeeze for the seller. They got to have something to take home for the risk that they're carrying this deal. We've seen, interest rates on seller financing as low as 5%, but you got to have a sweetheart deal and a great relationship between buyer and seller.
I've seen one at 4%.
That was bragging camp for you there, Bridget.
Come work with me.
But I think the more important aspect of your question there is the term length, or the amortization period for the seller financing. Again, when the seller and the buyer are the two dictating and negotiating these terms, we can set that out at whatever the seller is comfortable with. The ideal structure that I've been introducing lately is I actually put together a 10-year amortization schedule with a 5-year balloon payment. So you're paying your monthly payments as though the deal is going to last 10 years, which gives the buying party a lower monthly payment, and it gives the selling party a really nice payoff and a huge chunk of change at the end of that 5-year period. But really, I mean, there's no limit to what you can structure and how creative you can be with this, as long as buyer and seller are both coming to the table on this. I think that 5-year payoff periods are pretty common, even if you're going to have a 10-year amortization schedule. But just think from both perspectives there. From a seller's perspective, that puts you in an even lower tax bracket. That makes it an even longer period for you to offset some of those tax dollars, especially your capital gains in that scenario. But a shorter time period is going to mean larger monthly payments, and everyone likes a larger check every month. So it's just about finding that comfortable middle ground. That's what we're here to do as brokers. In the sales world at Route Consultant, is find that comfortable agreement between both buyer and seller that's going to make a huge win for everyone.
Right, but very simply, like you said, a 0% probably is never going to happen, because the sellers do hold a lot of risk in that as well.
Yeah, you can take the probably off it. It just ain't gonna happen.
You handle more with the sellers, Danny. I'll let you say that. Okay, this next one is from William. William says, hi, Danny and Bridget. What would you say would be the buyer's minimum ask when getting financials, settlement statements, etc., to get the biggest buy off, not only with yourself, but with the banks? And then after that, does having seller financing reduce the need for a deeper dive financially as far as the bank is concerned? So I don't know how you want to address.
Yeah, I'll kind of take it point by point. So if banks are involved, banks are going to want to see, 2 to 3 years worth of financials. Personally, I think that, if we're talking about right now, your 2022 year ending, the full 2022 year and Q1 of 23 is really what you need to be looking at. If you're trying to build a cash flow for yourself off in your projections for these businesses, looking at 2019, 2020, and 2021, it's going to really throw everything off, because we all know during those COVID years, volume was crazy through the roof. These businesses were selling for top dollar, very low interest rates on those purchases. Really, the banks are going to demand much more litigious and deep dive into the historical financials than you really need to justify the purchase. 2022 and 23 financials are what you should be focusing on right now. And to take it to your next point, introducing seller financing is not going to really mitigate the bank's desire to see those historical financials. It's just going to help the current financial status of that business cash flow better with the high interest rates and the debt service that buying party is going to be taking on.
All right. Next one we have here is from Mike. Mike wants to know, when you talk about seller financing being a part of the upfront offer or not, how much are you seeing as a hard requirement for money down from the buyer?
So with money down from the buyer, it's going to work a lot differently than it's going to if we're talking about initial deposits for a bank deal. And I guess there's two parts to that question that I'll have to answer, because some deals are going to be covered with 100% cash and seller financing. And if that's the case, your standard 10% initial deposit or in earnest money to get through from the time we have, that business under contract to the closing table should be more than sufficient. When banks come into play, typically that in earnest or that initial deposit is going to be really guarded and lorded over by the bank, and the seller's not going to see an initial deposit. Most of the times with seller financing, the seller's not going to realize those payments until after the business has closed and you're taking on that first monthly payment, unless, like I said, it's all cash and seller financing, in which case that initial deposit would be transitioned to you at closing.
All right. Trying to get through some of these and see if we have any more seller financing questions here. Let's see. Some of these are pretty funny, you guys. Why are there so many complaints from ground contractors online? Let me just tell you, they have always complained and will always complain. We complain about FedEx. That is not unique. We have some questions about what are the downsides of maybe being a FedEx contractor. Danny, I'm sure you hear lots about it, speaking to sellers all the time, but with any business like as big as FedEx, you always have changes, new safety requirements, things are always developing. So even just keeping up with that can be a bit much for contractors. Having employees and having to deal with drivers not showing up on a daily basis. Hopefully that's not your reoccurring problem there, but just keeping the staff. Like, there are lots of things that could go wrong, but working with, people, even a contractor who's been in the space for 20 years, like I said, we have businesses for sale with very tenured contractors, getting tips from them, tips from us. You can do it, you can learn how to navigate it, but there's always things to complain about. Danny, and you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, if you can find a business that you're going to be able to own and grow and profit from with absolutely no headaches attached to it, I mean, show me the way. I'll switch industries real quick in a hurry. But at the end of the day, you're owning a business. You're taking on the headaches. You're taking on the risk. You're taking on the frustrations, all for the opportunity to work for yourself and sign your own paychecks, right? I mean, there's always going to be a little bit of a negative and a downturn to it, but at the end of the day, FedEx has been a really phenomenal space for a lot of blue collar people to go and create generational wealth for their families in. And that's why we're so passionate about adding value to that network on a daily basis, because we believe in it and we think it's going to continue to provide opportunities for people to grow and move into business ownership. Let them complain. We'll teach you how to win.
Right. And if you keep your lenses so focused on right now and what's in front of you, it's always going to look dark and bad, but we like to keep our sights ahead. We're looking forward to the integration that FedEx is coming out with Express. We're looking forward to, e-commerce is not going away. It is only going up. So we see it as a very positive, as long as you're not just looking right here in front of you. Keep it positive. Makes everything a lot more pleasant.
That's right.
All right. This one is about trucks. Danny, routes with leased trucks.
Yeah.
Good or bad move? Why?
Yeah, I love leased trucks. I think that they're phenomenal. There's obviously some caveat to that. It depends on the route structure. Some routes are not going to be good for leases. Some routes are ideal for leases. Some routes, a mix of owned and leased trucks in your fleet is ideal. And I'll tell you why. It doesn't really change the business evaluation or the purchase price when you're going through that process. So don't get bogged down in the value of owned assets versus what you can earn back from leased assets. The valuations are what the valuations are. But a leased vehicle, more often than not, is going to have some form of maintenance included in that lease. So a huge part of the P&L that really does, drag a lot of contractors down who try to, use paper clips and chewing gum to keep their trucks held together. You're not going to have those exaggerative costs added to your bottom line with that leased fleet. A lot of times you can get newer vehicles on a regular basis that really does, believe it or not, make a big difference in driver retention. They want a comfortable vehicle to drive in. They spend their entire day in that truck. Having a good sound system, a comfortable seat, and windows so they don't have to crank down, it makes a big difference to these guys. And on top of all of that, it's really easy to get caught up in how beneficial the depreciation of your owned assets can be. You can still, in a small way, depreciate the leased trucks. And if you're going less than 125 or so miles a day on your daily routes, leased trucks are a great option for you. I mean, I personally think that having a split between leased and owned trucks is is the most beneficial way and the best way to get your fleet structured on your Schedule B. But yeah, don't shy away from leased vehicles in the truck list. It's a good thing for you, as long as you're not driving 200 miles a day on your routes. Then it becomes a problem.
Absolutely. All right, next one we have here. As a buyer of a 100% seller finance deal, he will maintain liens on the truck fleet. That makes sense. As I update trucks, Danny, is there a typical protocol for liquidating the old trucks? I'd like to keep the capital in the business instead of it going towards the note. Do you have any advice here? Have you seen this type of thing happen before?
Yeah, and there's going to be language in the APA that's going to govern that. It's something that you really need to keep an eye on. But the long and short of it is as you update your fleet, not necessarily are you going to have a lien against a new truck that you're buying. And keep in mind that having liens against specific vehicles and collateralizing those, you're not really meant to have a dollar for dollar collateral to lending dollar balance there. You're often going to have much less value in your collateralized fleet than you are in the totality of the seller financing. So keep in mind, you still own those vehicles. When you go to sell them, there's no reason to think that you're not going to keep 100% of that capital when you go and update your fleet. It's just a discussion that's going to remain open through buyer and seller throughout the process. You guys will continue to have contact after the closing date because you're going to be wiring them money every month. You guys got to keep that line of communication open. And hopefully that answers your question, but yes, you'll retain the capital from those vehicle sales. It's not as though because he has a lien against them that he's going to have any sort of claim to those dollars, he or her. The only time a lien is going to be a relevant aspect of anything that you're doing is if you default on that seller financing payment, which if you have a 100% seller finance deal, there's no reason you should.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next question here. Are there ways to finance a down payment in seller financing, in a seller financing deal that is not 100%? For example, if it were 70% or 80% seller financing deal, is there a way to forego that down payment? I've never seen that, Danny. I don't know, in your experience, have you ever seen something like that?
No, it's going to be really hard to get around that. That's why, when you really start to work with us as a buyer here at Route Consultant, we're going to ask you to show some sort of proof of funds because we want to see that you have, 10, 20, maybe even 30% of the purchase price of the business you're looking at in liquid capital. You have to bring something to the table, right? You can't just leverage the entire business through the seller and expect it to be a successful transaction. You're going to need to have some money of your own. You're going to have to make sure that the seller gets some sort of dividend at the beginning of this payout. They'll need cash at closing. They'll need to make sure that you have some sort of operating capital moving forward because there's no operating capital in a seller financed loan. It's just the purchase price of the business with interest attached to it for an amortized period. So you got to bring something to the table or you can't sit at it. You're going to have to bring a down payment in some way, shape, or form.
Right. This is a good question. In bank and seller financing, a combo in that deal, what happens there with the liens, the second lien for the seller financing? What's happening?
Great question. So typically, if there's going to be a combination of traditional bank financing and seller financing, the seller financing is going to be subject to what we refer to as a subordination clause, which essentially means that in the event of a default, the bank gets theirs first. Doesn't mean that you don't have legal rights to retain what you lent and what you're owed. It just means that you're probably going to be in second place on the fleet as far as the collateral is concerned, and you're going to be second in line to get paid back in any sort of legal judgment against the buying party that has defaulted on that. That shouldn't deter you from introducing seller financing to a deal that has bank financing attached to it as well. It should just give you that much more incentive to make sure that you have a vested interest in the success of that contract after you've sold it, and to make sure that you are well aware of the risks and that you have gone through the promissory note and the personal guarantee that Route Consultant provides with your legal counsel, and it's buttoned up tight.
Very good. Next one we have here. Why do owners want to sell their routes if they aren't retiring or have health issues?
Yeah, it could be any number of reasons. I mean, a lot of times folks just want to change the scenery. There's nothing wrong with that. I've got a couple of contracts I'm selling right now that the business owner was awarded these routes through contingency because they were so successful in their original route. And they're just kind of tired of doing double duty in multiple terminals. It could be really any number of reasons. And the fact that a business is for sale doesn't mean that the business isn't profitable or there's no reason to buy it. It just means that they're looking to do something different, just like you.
Right. Especially for carve out situations.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of times these businesses, I mean, we've seen it over and over again where they grow too much and the contractor says, hey, you know what? I don't want to have to worry about this many people, this many trucks right here. I want to expand somewhere else and get out of this terminal. So they'll cut off a piece, raise capital for their business, inject it into trucks. It's all a strategy game. So like Danny said, it could be many, many different reasons, but those are some of the ones that we've seen. Okay, next one here is the Northern Washington route remote ownership. Well, not that I see on my little quick fact guide, but if you reach out to us at Route Consultant, I'm sure whoever is handling that Washington listing. Oh, Danny.
I'm handling that listing. Yeah, absolutely. I am. So the business is not currently set up for purely remote ownership. There's, about 20 hours or so that the AO is putting in at the terminal a week. And that's just the way that he has the business structured right now. That's not to say it couldn't support remote ownership at some time. But remember what I said earlier, it's all about the size of the business, how you manage it, and how you go through each line item of your P&L to maximize the dollars that you can invest into your BC in that situation. If you want to talk about it in detail, can you guys pop my email address into that thing and let these folks contact me? Talk to me about it. It's a beautiful listing. It's only been live for 5 days now. So come talk to me about it.
Yes, I think your email address is probably just daniel.robinson@routeconsultant.com.
Astute guess.
Hopefully.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yes. All right. So we got another question here. This is tough. I'm not sure how you're going to answer this, but what is going to be the best way to handle the upcoming multiple dispatch times when Express merges with Ground?
It's going to be something that's going to cause a lot of people a lot of headaches. That's for sure. We have a full-scale operational team here that can help answer those questions. I'll tell you right now, it's probably going to mean, introducing some recruiting into your bottom line right now, getting a couple more drivers in place, setting your BC to work with your terminal manager, doing everything you can to get on the forefront of this and educating yourself about what that's going to mean. But it's going to boil down to how you're going to be able to optimize your routes, going through your DRO painstakingly to make sure it's as buttoned up and tight as it can possibly be. But I mean, you're going to be gaining a good bit of revenue with this Express integration. It's not expected that you're going to get that free and clear, not from FedEx, right? You have to put in a little bit more work, and it's nothing to be scared about. It's absolutely a path that you can walk down, and we'll help you get there. Call us and we'll get you involved with our operational team, and they'll give you a step-by-step on how to handle this the right way.
Absolutely. It's going to rely heavily on your BC management there with scheduling and your recruiting plan. The logistics of multiple dispatch times, we've seen other companies do that and do it successfully. So I'm sure FedEx has a plan there for how they're going to roll that out and handle that. However, like Danny said, we do have an operations team to help handle that and to walk us through that process as it comes out. But good question. Lots of people are worried about that, but we'll see how it all goes. Bottom line is, though, it should bump up revenue, and that's always something positive. Okay. This one is coming from Mike. Mike wants to know, does previous experience within this space have any effect on the overall acquisition process, timing for purchase, interest rates, etc.? We might need a little bit more detail on what the experience in the space is, Mike, but if you had been like a FedEx driver or something, maybe if you know that terminal manager personally, if you were a BC, that could potentially, move along the timeline of how fast the acquisition goes. But as far as interest rates and banking is concerned, probably that wouldn't affect anything there. Danny, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, definitely not going to help you on the banking side of things. And it's probably not going to help really expedite the process for you at all. It's going to give you a leg up when you go in for your aim and when you get into the terminal, if you have some sort of experience and you have some industry knowledge specifically. But FedEx is such a tightly wound ecosystem, and it's so internalized that, unless it's been in FedEx specifically that you've had that experience, it's probably not going to give you that much of a leg up. We are just as successful getting people with absolutely no experience in the logistics space approved for these deals as we are people who are currently BCs in another business. So it's not a bad thing, but I don't think it's going to help, in a measurable way throughout your acquisition process.
So thank you, Mike. He said previous/current owner versus a new person to the space. What does that timeline or bank experience look like, or how is that different?
Definitely not going to make a difference on the banking side of things. If you're a current owner, though, it's going to be much more simple. You're already going to have your V number. You're already going to have your FedEx ID. You're going to be able to go in and say, hey, look at my scorecard from my current business. I'm operating at gold. I'd love to come into this terminal and do the same thing for you. It's going to really grease the tracks getting through that approval process with a terminal. Absolutely, it will. Don't know if it's going to expedite it because they're still going to have their own back office things. They're having to go through engineering in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh doesn't care about your experience. They just look at the black and white and the bottom line there. But it could definitely help you out inside of the terminal as far as getting approvals and not having the terminal manager kind of sit around and weigh the options. It should be a pretty quick yes if you're currently a successful operator.
Absolutely. Next question here, and we're winding down on time. So if you have any last minute questions that have been burning, pop them in there. Like I said, I'll try to get to as many of them as I can in these last few minutes, but we probably won't get to all of them. So if you still need a question answered, email us info@routeconsultant.com. We'll get those answered. You can email me personally and I will see to it that you have answers to your questions. But for now, Danny, tell us, where can we find more information pertaining to this integration of Express?
Yeah, so who knows?
Cool.
FedEx has been talking about this for the last 3 years, it seems like. They just made the announcement official. It had a lot more to do with the dividends being paid out and a couple of things in the economic world for the shareholders than it did on the operational side. But it's going to be a situation where this is not going to be an overnight integration. It's going to take months, if not years, to get it fully integrated into the ground network. And it's going to really vary by region, if not by terminal, as to how it's going to go. Keep in mind, these FedEx terminals are their own little kingdoms and inside of this large ecosystem, and one size does not fit all. So there's going to be nuance and caveats to the way that all of this is integrated, terminal by terminal, region by region, and depending on how much express volume actually exists in your operating area. So as information comes available, we will digest it and put it out on our own platforms and make sure you guys have our take on it, and that we're doing everything we can to help keep you as educated as possible with those changes happening. But as of right now, there's not a really black and white answer as to what this integration is going to look like and when it's going to take place. It's going to be a slow roll like everything else with FedEx.
Great. Y'all are hilarious. I love this chat. We've got lots of questions about acronyms today. So if you guys are wondering what BC, AO, all these different terms, HTL, whatever we're saying, and if you have questions about that, email, or we have 101 videos that you can access on our website, YouTube, Route Consultant. We have, FedEx 101 course that is free. And if you don't watch the FedEx 101 course, or you're not a consulting client, it will be rather difficult to get into the space. So at least utilize all of the free resources, and that will teach you a lot about some of the jargon that we're using. But BC, that's your business contact, your manager. AO is the owner of the business, right? Like that's what you would be potentially if you pass your little interview with FedEx.
That's another acronym, the AIM. It's an assignee interview meeting.
Well, do you call it an AIM or do you call it an SRM?
SRM is actually senior manager.
Right. SRM.
Your SRM interview, your AIM.
Right.
Guys,
AIM. Yeah, lots of different things.
You gotta start working with us. We can really iron this out for you.
All right. This will have to be the last question of the day because we are now over. But Danny, how might a leased fleet impact a sale?
We touched on this just a little bit before, but honestly, it shouldn't really impact it that much at all. We have very laid out and concrete ways to get through that process. More often than not, those leases are going to be assumable or reassignable. It takes a little bit of legwork working with the leasing company to make that happen. And like I said, the value of the fleet does not directly affect the listing price of the business itself. So the evaluations that we do are based off of an adjusted EBITDA number, the net operating income that a business is projected to produce, not necessarily the value of the fleet. So with that being said, it shouldn't have much of an effect at all, other than you'll probably see a much lower line item related to the repair and maintenance of the fleet if it's a large leased operation. So as long as you're doing less than 120, 125 miles per route per day, leased vehicles, like I said before, they're fantastic. They're a really great way to help manage your business, manage that repair and maintenance cost, and to keep your drivers happy and retain them longer than you would if they were driving a hoopty.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Danny. We really appreciated it. Everyone else.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you next week. Next Wednesday, we will be back. And don't forget about our Linehaul Summit on April 21st. If you need more info on that, reach out to us or pop it in the chat. We have more information there. As always, thank you.